Welcome back to the show. We got a great one lined up. Somebody roll that beautiful intro.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show. You can follow us on X, YouTube, and DigPerspectives.com for exclusive content. Right now, it's $3.37 trillion market cap for crypto. The market's off 3.1%. Bitcoin 105,000 plus. Ethereum 2,400 plus. XRP is $2.19 at the number 4 spot. We're up 0.5% on the 24-hour. We're up 0.2 on the 7-day. The range of price between 218 and 232, which we had overnight. There was a spike in price there that has since calmed down. We'll keep an eye on it. I want to start right here and remind everybody of the dangers of cryptocurrency investing. Europol busts crypto fraud ring laundering 460 million euros from over 5,000 victims, 5 arrested across Spain in coordinated operation with the U.S., Estonia, and France. And no better time to tell you right now about iTrustCapital, ladies and gentlemen, and the fact that DAI and myself have teamed up with iTrust, and you get new clients get an exclusive $100 funding bonus. But what you want to check out is the IRAs if you haven't done it. I've been with them 5-6 years now. I love them. You should check that out too for yourself. Roll over your 401k, 403b, and everything else with it. But now they have the new premium custody account. And that's why I showed you the dangers of crypto. Because the new premium custody account is a closed loop system, ladies and gentlemen, that doesn't allow for these hacks to happen the way that they do on exchanges. And I can't express this enough to you. Because, first of all, there's low cost, there's no monthly fee, 1% trading fee right there. So you all love it right from that. But the reality is if you're a buy and long-term hold and you're not doing a bunch of trading in and out of assets, this may be the place you want to have your portfolio because you can eliminate the potential dangers that you'd find in most other platforms. Because of this closed loop system, if you were to be hacked, the worst thing that could happen is somebody could cash out your crypto and send it to your checking account because it can only go to your checking account. You can only come out in cash. And that's what's so important to understand about these premium custody accounts. With that closed loop system, your crypto transactions stay secure. No external wallets. Why would you ever pay for institutional grade custody when you know you can get it for free? Click the link below or simply go to itrustcapital.com/XRP Army and use that code number at the bottom, XRP6. That's your XRP code. Make sure you click the link to get started. Let's take a look at this because we got to look at this in more of a macro way of this digital asset coming to light as a new emerging asset class in the world of finance and in the world in general. And with the U.S. dollar starting off its worst start since 1973, the implications of inflationary pressure and crypto and international stocks, all of it is implicating there are problems here, ladies and gentlemen, and they're just getting worse. Now, I did a thing in the Freedom Zone breaking down the comparison between 1930s Great Depression and where we are today. And you would be mind blown to figure out and see the comparable numbers. There's no comparison that we are in a much worse position today than we were in the 1930 Great Depression. True story. Don't believe me? Join the Freedom Zone and find out for yourself. But nonetheless, all of these things go hand in hand, like the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, and the fact that he will be replaced in 26. Here's the U.S. Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, talking about exactly that.
While we're talking about interest rates and the Federal Reserve, it has been recently reported that you might be in consideration for the job as the next Fed chair. When you've been asked about the likelihood recently, you said that it's up to the president. Is it a job that you would want?
I will do what the president wants, but I think I have the best job in D.C. We're making a lot of progress with the president's leadership. Think about it. We are going to have the tax bill on his desk by July 4th. We're going to be wrapping up the trade talks. So I think we've had great momentum, and we will be working on Chair Powell's successor over the coming weeks and months.
You had mentioned that an announcement could be as early as October or November, and Powell's term ends in May of 2026. How is the street supposed to navigate between that announcement time and the time between the term being over for Chair Powell? You were the one, I want to remind people, that had brought up the idea of a shadow Fed chair prior to the election. Is a new appointee supposed to be considered that shadow Fed chair?
Well, not necessarily. We'll see. There's a seat opening up, a 14-year seat opening up in January. So we've given thought to the idea that perhaps that person would go on to become the chair when Jay Powell leaves in May, or we could appoint the new chair in May. Unfortunately, that's just a 2-year seat.
So ultimately, do you think that there could be some confusion?
Well, I don't see why there would be confusion, because obviously there are people who are currently at the Fed who are under consideration. So why would there be confusion if that you add another candidate in January?
So what about Fed policy as it stands today? The president has voiced his preference for lower interest rates. There have been investors, but also most recently the Bank of International Settlements, warning about any inflation risks tied to the tariff policy. Realistically, how much can the Fed lower rates this year? And what is the level and rate of unemployment that would suggest a faster pace of rate cuts? Economically, what has to slow?
Well, look, I said during my confirmation, I won't talk about the mistakes the Fed's going to make. I'll only talk about the ones they have made. They made a gigantic mistake in 2022. And as I like to point out, medical studies have shown that people who fall tend to look at their feet, which makes them fall more. And my worry here is that having fallen down on the American people in 2022, Fed's now looking at their feet. We have seen no inflation from tariffs. If we do, which we don't have to, then there'd be a one-time price adjustment. Nothing is more transitory than that. So, Team Transitory, having failed the American people in 22, they seem a little frozen at at the wheel here.
And there you have it. And all of this is tied into moving everything over to this new digital on-chain economy, tokenizing the world. And it starts with getting this big, beautiful bill passed by July 4th with all the necessary tax breaks to unleash the roaring economy.
One last question. Is this going to happen? Is it going to be on the desk of the president by July 4th?
I believe that it will be out of the Senate with an affirmative vote from the body by midnight tonight. That's my prayer, my hope. And if that happens, in the next 48 hours thereafter, the House will take it up. They will like it enough to send it to the president's desk. And then you'll see fireworks at the White House around the country, because $5 trillion, nearly $5 trillion in tax increases will have been avoided. The American people breathe a sigh of relief.
And there you have it right there. All of this is tied in because we know that we're up against it. Again, the comparables from the Great Depression to today are staggering. Every one of us, if you saw the comparables between the Great Depression today, the car payment versus your paycheck, the rent versus your paycheck in 1930 versus your paycheck today, every one of us would take the 1930 ratio over what we're currently dealing with today. And all of that is because of the pressure on the United States dollar. Make no mistake about it. We've highlighted it here multiple times. It's at 80-year lifespan right now. In the last 5 currencies to serve in this role, 2 of them died and had an 80-year lifespan. So what happens to the U.S. dollar? Stablecoins, that's where the marriage of this new innovation comes into play. And here is the current Fed Chair, Jerome Powell, talking about a positive step forward for stablecoins.
And so yes to that question. Let me say on stablecoins, if I can.
Yeah.
I do share the concerns that you hear here, but I also think it's a positive step that we don't have a regulatory framework for these now in the United States. We tried very hard in the last Congress to work with, people on both sides of the aisle to create such a thing. Now it looks like we're well on the way to creating a framework, which I think is something we need. If we're going to have stablecoins, and apparently we need to have a federal and state level regulatory framework, which I think we're making progress towards having.
And that is exactly what we're about to get. Now, you can see, hopefully, from the things that I've shared here, the onset of a new appointed Fed chair to come and be announced soon for this guy. Then we got to have the big tax bill go through. $5 trillion worth of tax cuts remain. At the same time that we're introducing new digital dollars that are highly regulated at state and federal level. And then here he is. Ripple's Jack McDonald, Senior VP for RLUSD, explains why RLUSD stablecoin is more highly regulated than any other stablecoin, including Tether and USDC. I have covered this, but you need to hear it from the horse's mouth. RLUSD is one step further up the regulatory food chain there, much more rigor in requirements. Take a listen.
Stablecoins, you can start to separate out the issuers, the types of stablecoins. There's either US dollar backed or non-dollar backed, and then you can get into kind of subcategories of, are they 100% US dollar backed? US dollar backed stablecoins represent 97% of the $240 billion market today. So I think that your question is really around US dollar backed stablecoins. There's some speculation that not all dollar backed stablecoins are the same. In our case, we follow the guidelines from our regulator, New York DFS, and only invest in high quality liquid assets in terms of those reserves. And so not all stablecoin issuers are the same. Some are regulated, some are not. We're the most regulated in the land by being regulated as a trust bank out of New York State. And so that's different than a Tether that's largely unregulated, certainly not regulated in the US, doesn't go through the same sort of regulatory requirements that we do. Circle issues their stablecoins out of money transmitter licenses here in the US. We have some money transmitter licenses. We also have a trust bank charter, and that's where we issue the stablecoin out of. So it's one step, I'd say, further up the regulatory food chain. There are much more rigor in requirements that we need to go through. And also, as a trust bank, we act as a fiduciary for our clients. So there's an important distinction there that only as a fiduciary can you hold client reserves in truly bankruptcy remote accounts, which we have. Specific to PayPal's stablecoin Pi USD, a little bit different in that they also enjoy being issued out of a New York regulated entity, Paxos. However, those are two different companies. And so PayPal essentially licenses the platform, if you will, or have a bit of a white label type of relationship with Paxos to get their stablecoin issued. We're different in that we're totally vertically integrated. So we have our own license. We control 100% of the economics, the issuance, the distribution, et cetera, and just rely on our own licenses to do that.
There you have it. And there explains what or at least I feel it explains why RLUSD has been kind of sitting back in the shadows, because I believe they have an enormous amount of enterprise clients ready to go, institutions included. And I believe they're all waiting for that legislation to go through to really kick it off. Meanwhile, just in, USDC Issuer Circle applies for National Trust Bank license in the U.S. I think Jack spoke to this to say that RLUSD actually has a higher regulatory clearance and standard because of how they are structured. And I think USDC is looking to make up that difference and close that gap a bit with this filing. And not to mention the fact that I think we're going to see a lot of crypto entities want to become banks, and a lot of banks begin to offer crypto services. Meanwhile, let's talk about this and hear from Brad Garlinghouse talking about the dollar and the other dollars of the world and why all of it matters.
Many people in the United States particularly don't understand what it would be like to have lived in Argentina and have the Argentinian peso devalued effectively to zero multiple times in my lifetime. Why would you hold that currency?
We don't realize that could become us.
That's exactly the point, right? Like, I think that we underestimate what that macro dynamic looks like over the long term.
There you have it right there. It is obvious, as we talked about on the stage of XRP Las Vegas 2024 with the Honorable Cristian Carlo, that the stable coins are being introduced to deal with bringing all of these bonds back home. What could become hyperinflated bonds, by the way. And that is where you get this new issuance of stable coins in a new use case, which has been projected to outpace the current position that other countries take with U.S. Treasury bonds. So this is a way of creating a new use case to ensure the dollar dominance as we transition into the new economy. At the same time, we're going to be changing Fed chair at the same time that we're dealing with the dollar having one of the worst starts to a year since 1973. Again, here's Jack McDonald, Senior VP for RLUSD stablecoin, tell you exactly where RLUSD will be in 18 to 24 months from now. Take a listen.
And Jack, where does Ripple hope for RLUSD to be, 18 to 24 months from now? What is are there any goals, any milestones that you're seeking to reach in terms of adoption and penetration of the market?
24 months from now, we certainly expect to be, and it depends how we define them, but certainly one of the top 3 regulated U.S. dollar-backed stable coins in the world, if not higher.
Oh,
and Jack,
if not
U.S. dollar-backed stable coins in the world, if not higher.
If not higher. Okay. Well, that's incredibly impressive right there, because a lot of adoption would have to take place for one to get up even into the conversation of where Tether is in its current volume. But I think they could do it, especially understanding that Tether current structure right now pushes it outside of U.S. compliance, just as it has been pushed out of MiCA compliance in the EU. Now, that doesn't stop Tether for starting new business entities to start from square one in those regions respectively to make sure that it starts off properly and all the compliance and everything's there. But doesn't that speak volumes that Tether is so non-compliant that it's easier to start a brand new company and introduce it into that market, whether it's the US or the EU, than it is to get Tether's house in order? That's how I understand that particular information. And the fact that Jack McDonald sees RLUSD in the next 18-24 months in the top 3 digital dollar stablecoins, if not higher, well, I think Jack's got some information that we're not privy to. And that's why I ultimately believe that they're launching a stable coin on the XRP ledger and other networks like Ethereum as well, is because this will pull the traditional world and the need to use digital dollars onto the value protocol that is the XRP ledger. And in doing so, what are you really doing? You're pulling the liquidity of the world onto that protocol. And when you do that, eventually over time, I think you could use XRP itself to underpin the US dollar and not just one commodity like gold or an agreement of exclusively selling all barrels of oil in US dollars. That's where I think we're going long term, and so does Greg Kidd. No, well, this is why I love the idea of a basket of assets, right? And I do mean like gold, oil, and digital assets alike. I mean, it stands to reason that that's the way you would want to go. I had a conversation a long time ago, back in 2019, with David Schwartz, where I was talking about with him about, having reserves of all kinds of different assets from all over this sector of, whether it's commodities or alike, really stabilize it. If you could underpin the dollar with all of those things, instead of just an agreement to print more or just a petrodollar agreement, then you really would have the confidence of a dollar for the next 150 years. What say you?
I agree.
That wasn't very tough.
But I mean, you really said it well. To me, it's just a risk to not take that risk.
Right.
There it is. It's just a risk to not take that risk. And I think that is the moment we're living in, ladies and gentlemen. We're living in that moment where they can't afford to not take the risk. And meanwhile, meaning, look, if we're right at all, if we're even close to being right here, and we know that we've even talked to Christian Carlo on stage this year at XRP Las Vegas, that he firmly believes, to my question, that the United States Treasury will be issuing at some point U.S. digital asset bonds for XRP, Bitcoin, and other assets, well, as well as corporates and municipalities. And if we see that, and I do believe we will see that, then we really have to come to a new understanding of what is actually taking place here. And what is actually taking place here is really more about the United States dollar dominance than it is the introduction of a new asset class. The new asset class is a side effect of how you keep the United States dollar dominant for the next 150 years by introducing a new digital on-chain economy for which this new innovation has all of these brand new digital assets that can be used and protocols. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen. This is one of the major pieces that people, I believe, don't put together because they're looking at things so closely, can't see the forest for the trees. The other thing I would say is that one of the other great reasons to create these new digital assets is because the world needs a new money. The world needs a new money. And at my house, it's XRP. Which would also beg the question, will Ripple become a bank? Some say that Ripple is already classified as a neobank. I say that Ripple is potentially the Federal Reserve 2.0 in the new digital on-chain economy because the Fed ain't it. That's where I have it. We'll have to see what happens, but that's where we are on this day. And just like even Greg Kidd said again, even Ripple could actually get a bank license.
It's focused only on deposits and payments, no branches, no lending. Basically, I will continue to promote legislation. So a company like Ripple could actually get a bank license, right?
There you go. He's not saying they will, he's just saying they could. But to that point, what I really think about is if we do see that issuance of U.S. digital asset bonds by the U.S. Treasury for XRP and other assets, then my thought is that the U.S. Treasury could come in and purchase the XRP escrow each month, issue U.S. digital asset bonds for citizens to buy, and they could pay for those XRP every month that come out of escrow. They could pay Ripple in U.S. Treasury bonds. And why would they need them? Because they're issuing and minting real USD to the largest institutions of the world. And that, over time, I think could make Ripple the Fed 2.0. Not financial advice from me or anyone else. I like where this is going. I'll catch all of you on the next one.